The next step is an opportunity for us to connect with alumni, pretty recent alumni who are off in the world doing things after their time at the University of Miami. So we want to bring those students back so they can share their stories and you all have a chance to interact with them and ask some questions. Okay, our next guests on the next step are Natalie Hamilton, Layla Nasser, Crystal Nattoo, and James Wilson, all recent University of Miami alumni who are now pursuing their PhDs in a STEM field. We're eager to catch up with these scholars and hear what they've been up to, and to borrow a trend from Instagram, especially to get a sense of how it started and how it's going with regard to their PhDs. So welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Let's get started with some introductions. Natalie, if you could start us off.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Natalie Hamilton. I'm originally from Hollywood, Florida, and I'm currently doing my PhD in neuroscience at the Johns Hopkins University. And my current research interests have to deal with my thesis work in the development of direction selective circuits.
My name is Layla Nasser. I'm from just north of Orlando, Florida in Winter Springs. I am currently at Yale University, and I'm pursuing a degree in the biological sciences. Specifically, I'm in the Department of Cell Biology, so my PhD will be in cell biology. And my research interests are in neurodegenerative disease and how neurodegenerative diseases manifest at the level of a single cell.
My name is Crystal Nattoo. I'm originally from Sunrise, Florida in Broward County. I'm currently at Stanford University pursuing a master's and a PhD in electrical engineering. And my current research interest is flexible electronics, but implemented using atomically thin semiconducting materials, also known as 2D semiconductors.
My name is James Wilson. I'm originally from Athens, Georgia. I'm currently attending the University of Texas here at Austin, and I'm currently getting my PhD in molecular and cell biology. As far as research interests, I'm still in my first year, so still have some time to figure that out. But generally, it's marine biology with a focus on environmental impacts on cellular processes.
All sounds very interesting, although Crystal, I might need you to stick around afterwards so you can explain to me what it was you just said a few seconds ago. If we could go back around, maybe you can share a bit about what you did in your time at UM. Your majors, minors, and whatever involvements were most prominent for you outside the classroom.
So I was also a neuroscience major at the University of Miami, and I minored in chemistry. And outside of the classroom, I spent a lot of time doing research. I was part of the IMSD program, which helped undergraduates get involved with research. I was a part of the Baptist Collegiate Ministry as well, but I really enjoyed spending time in the lab outside of class.
I also was a neuroscience major. I also had a double major in biochemistry and molecular biology, with also a minor in chemistry. And then my time on campus, I also did undergraduate research starting my freshman year. And then I was also in the IMSD program, but I also was involved in the SACNAS organization, as well as the UConnect undergraduate research organization. And really also did fun things too, like spend time with my friends and go to the beach. Yeah, I think those are most of the things I did.
At UM, I was an electrical engineering major, but I also had a minor in arts, which is when I focused on like graphic design type of stuff. And my major involvements on campus, I was president of the photography club on campus for a couple years. I was also involved in like a lot of the engineering honor society, like Tau Beta Pi and HKN. But yeah, those are my main things, electronics and art.
So when I was at UM, I was majoring in biology, marine science, and creative writing. Ended up demoting that third major in creative writing to a minor because of all the research I got involved in, especially at the end of my undergrad career. In terms of other things that I did, I mostly tried to travel as much as I could for free, usually through research experiences. So did 2 summers in California doing research at some universities there, traveled for conferences and stuff, just any type of way I could. And I also was a part of mock trial as well.
So by show of hands for our panelists, did any of you come into UM planning to get a PhD afterwards? Okay, Layla, that was kind of sort of the plan when you
Yeah,
entered UM.
I had no idea what it entailed, but I thought I somehow, yeah, wanted to do that.
Okay, great. So there was at least an attractive idea. It was on the radar somewhere. So for those of you who did not, what was it? What was it that you aspired to do when you first started college, Natalie?
I was a diehard pre-med all of high school, and I had never even like heard of doing research until I came to UM. I didn't even know what it was like to be a scientist. So yeah, my plans were always to go to medical school.
I really like technology, so I always wanted to just like work at a tech company, probably Apple. Um, but yeah, I kind of found out about research through RU's, the research summer experiences that James was kind of talking about, and I did about three of them during all of undergrad, and I really enjoyed that.
Similarly, like I had no idea what grad school was. I remember like being in a meeting with Chris one day and he suggested it to me. And I had never even like heard of the concept of grad school other than like med school and like law school and stuff. But coming into college, I always was, or the plan was to become a marine biologist, but got to college, realized I had no idea what an actual marine biologist did. So along the way, I kind of figured it out and decided it was actually something I wanted to pursue.
So for everybody, what were the key experiences then that inspired you to take this seriously, to kind of shift your attention towards going to graduate school and getting a PhD?
For me, starting my freshman year, I began shadowing doctors, and I sort of had this realization that I was sort of less interested in actually treating diseases and more on like what is the mechanism behind human disease. And so when I got involved with research, I saw that being a scientist, you could actually address those problems. So for me, having that early exposure to research influenced my decision to sort of change career paths.
So I came um, into my college experience wanting to be a scientist, but having like no idea what that entailed. I think I did like one Google search and was like, oh, I might have to get a PhD. Like, okay, I'll figure that out when I get there. But getting involved in research, and then I think like some others have mentioned, going to conferences um, was massive in my understanding of what a research community is and all of the different places I could go with a PhD, and really got me excited and knowledgeable about what it meant to really be a scientist.
Yeah, I think it was kind of something that just came up because between sophomore and junior year, I was like, I needed to do an internship, but I didn't sign up for internships this early. I was like, what other internships could I do? So I went to my academic advisor, and she's like, oh, you could like try RU because you really like academic and like research type things. And so I was like, okay, and I applied and I got it, and I went to Vanderbilt for the summer and I fell in love with it, and then from then on I knew I wanted to do a PhD. So it kind of just like fell into my lap, kind of.
Honestly, my experience was pretty similar to Crystal's. It was literally just after my sophomore year, I wanted to do something that summer. And so I applied to some internships, happened to apply to a bunch of REUs, not knowing what that meant, but just saw that they would pay for everything. So I applied and got in and spent the summer in San Diego, where for 10 weeks I got to design my own project, had the freedom to come up with whatever I wanted, have some guidance, and getting that first taste really was what kind of led me on that path to determining I wanted to go to grad school.
So I talk with a lot of students who are interested in graduate school, but not as many who are interested in getting PhDs. So how did you all make that decision that you would pursue a PhD instead of a master's degree?
So I guess for neuroscience, it's not as common to really pursue a master's degree unless you're sort of not sure about research and you want more exposure, or B, you're looking to go to like another professional school, like medical school, for instance. So for me, because I knew I was interested in a research career, I decided to just go with the PhD.
My experience is pretty similar because I was coming in with interests in neuroscience and molecular biology. There are very few programs that are master's programs for that field specifically. And I think especially because I did have some undergraduate research experience, I did feel prepared to just go start my PhD. And then I guess also having the PhD also would help me to go on to further my goals in leading a research group. That would be necessary for that ultimate goal to be achieved.
For me, part of the reason why I chose PhD over master's is because I was still uncertain of whether or not I would want to go into more of like an academic space or more of a professional industry space, especially after seeing a lot of what academia looks like now and how I kind of see it for the future, and kind of wanting to be a part of that. Going for the PhD opens like a lot more opportunities for going both of those ways than I think the master's would. And the master's is like more like course focused in my department of electrical engineering, while the PhD is more open to like discovering what you want to do. And so that was more appealing.
For me, why I chose PhD over master's, it was mostly due to like the guidance that I got, being that if you think you want to go into research, it was more beneficial to go PhD than it was to pay for a master's, because in most cases you do have to pay. And so the cost factor was definitely a big consideration. Then also because there's so many alternatives, if you're still not certain if that's something you want to pursue to the point of a PhD, that are free and have a little more freedom, such as a postbac or working as a lab tech. Like there's other things that you could do in terms of a master's that you could get paid to do and or not have to pay for that additional degree. So it just made more sense in the long run just to go to the PhD, because then I also found out with most of the programs I was considering, if you really wanted to, you could tap out after 2 years and just walk away with a master's, but it would have been paid for. So that was my biggest considerations for why.
What about the application process? How might you compare and contrast it to selecting an undergraduate institution? How is the process for picking a graduate program different for you?
So it was completely different. I started my search just by looking at the neuroscience departments of a bunch of different schools in many states, not just Florida, and looking to see if there were faculty in those departments who were doing work that excited me. And that's sort of how I began my search. My parents really wanted me to stay in Florida for undergrad, so it kind of limited my options when I was applying, but I'm happy I chose UM. But yeah, it was really different in that regard.
Definitely echo what Natalie said. I think some of the things that, at least to me, made the process a little bit similar was that in addition to looking at faculty and research that I was interested in, I also did want to keep in mind that I wanted to live in certain places in the US, like particularly being close enough to family, which I didn't know at the time, but being at least a relatively feasible driving distance away from my family ended up making a difference during COVID. I guess the other thing that I think makes it maybe a little bit more similar to finding an undergraduate university for me was going to different conferences. A lot of times, and James referred to this earlier, you can get scholarships and awards to attend conferences for free. So they pay for your flight, they pay for your hotel. A lot of times you're in a really fun place in the country. I've been to conferences in Long Beach, California, and in Phoenix and DC. Like completely paid for. And at those conferences, there were a lot of different schools just like giving away like a pen with their school name or a bag. And you could talk to some of the admissions officers. So I think in that way, it was almost, even though it was different from like visiting an undergrad institution and taking a tour around campus, you are like learning about the program. So if any of you are interested in going to graduate school, I highly recommend trying to go to an undergraduate focused conference.
For me, I had a really similar experience where I wanted to stay in Florida for undergrad, but I was like, for grad school, I want to go somewhere. But I think I wanted to, it sounds funny, but I wanted to stay near the ocean because it's really important to me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to choose a grad school in California. And thankfully for my degree, a lot of the good schools are in California anyway. So that didn't really like limit my options for electrical engineering. So I applied to basically as many of the schools in California that were really good. And I think one thing, I didn't apply to all of them though, because I think one thing that an advisor recommended to me that is like in undergrad, you kind of look for a school based on like the social things going on, like the school environment, like what's it like as a student there. But for grad school, it's a lot more important to look for an advisor who's doing research that interests you or a group that's like really fits your vibe because you're gonna be with them. Those are the people you're gonna work with every day for the next like probably 5 or 6 years. So hopefully you like what you're doing and you like the people that you're working with. So that's like probably the most important thing. Although like where you live is super important because you're also gonna live there for a really long time. You should like the area that you live in. But yeah, just like having those things in mind and not really compromising too much in any way so that you're the happiest you possibly can be.
And I guess for me, my biggest focus, and I guess what was a little different compared to undergrad, is that I did mostly focus on location first and foremost. Mostly being in around research and understanding how the environment works. It's not like undergrad where you start with a class of like 2,000 other people in your age group who you're regularly interacting with. It's like, no, you have like a smaller community on campus that you interact with. And then beyond that, it's like you spend your time in whatever city you're located. Like that's where you will be spending your life, especially for such a long commitment. Cause like my program's like an average graduation rate of like 5.5 years. So I chose cities that I wanted to live in, and then choosing such a broad major like molecular or cell biology made it pretty easier from there to choose good universities and then look through their faculty and make sure I was applying to schools that had faculty I was really excited about working with.
What are some things that you can think of that really surprised you once you started graduate school?
One thing that surprised me was just how important your actual thesis project is, and just making sure that it's something that's doable within a reasonable time frame. Because at least for me, my experience was that my project was very ambitious and kind of risky, and unfortunately that can involve lots of failure. And you have to have a lot of perseverance through that. And I think the advice that a lot of students get going into PhDs is if you have to choose between a good project and a good mentor, go with the good mentor. But I think it's important to have both, and to really ask people in the lab, what are the projects in the lab? And do you think this is a good direction to go in, like when you're considering a lab? So that was really surprising.
I think for me, it's just how nice everyone is, and also just how far being thoughtful and reliable and confident, which I think hopefully a lot of you are. I think a lot of you are, and just like really trying to show that as much as possible. Like that can take you really, really far. At least that's been my experience.
I think that surprised me the most was how different where I was moving was gonna be from Miami. Because I was just so used to like the diversity of Miami, and then I come here and then like maybe like 1% of Stanford, 1 or 2% is Black, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is really different. So that's something that surprised me the most. But I think that being here for a while, I have definitely found some really amazing people that really like understand me and I love being around, and has made like my experience like so much more than I really expected like in my first year. It's kind of like evolved as I've been here. Like my experience has really gotten better as I've gotten used to like focusing on finding those people who are actually like there to like build me up and like be a part of my like championing team. But yeah.
So I can't honestly say that there's anything that surprised me so far, but also I'm pretty new. I just started in August. So I feel like my prior research experiences, since I am doing a rotation, so I'm trying out a couple labs my first year, has prepared me pretty well for everything that I'm going through. If anything, it feels slightly easier than undergrad because I don't have like 3 majors on top of the research that I'm trying to conduct. But I'm sure in the coming months, I'll definitely encounter some surprises.
So let's look ahead to the future. What's the next step for each of you? What do you want to do at this point in your career? Natalie?
So ultimately, I still want to remain in research, but I'm realizing more and more that the problems that interest me are more translational in nature. So I'm actually considering going back to my old goal of medical school. So that's actually my plan. I didn't start out that way at all, but I just think that having that knowledge of the whole human body rather than just the brain and the nervous system will give me a more complete knowledge to really attack those problems that I'm interested in.
I'm still kind of figuring out, luckily. So I'm a third year, so I have a couple more years, 2 or 3 more years before I can have to really commit to a specific idea. I think one big thing that I've learned in grad school, though, is that I'm really interested in staying in academia in some capacity. So most likely after my PhD, I'll do a postdoctoral fellowship. And then I think like my like dream right now, although it is really a lot of academic positions can be really competitive, but my dream is to work at a university or college where I can focus on teaching about as much as I focus on research. And that's not true for a lot of universities. Hiring professors, you mostly have to focus on your research, but I've had some really amazing experiences teaching here, and that's a huge focus for me.
I would definitely echo parts of what Layla said. As I've been here, I was kind of interested in academia, and I think that's more of an interest now. I've actually been involved a lot with like recruiting with Stanford and involved a lot with their equity and inclusion initiatives, and that has really like opened my eyes to like the educational problems, especially in engineering, that need to be fixed. And I definitely want to be a part of that. So I definitely want to be in academia to some capacity. I'm not sure exactly what, but I have plenty of time to figure that out since I'm just a second year right now. So yeah.
So luckily, my first semester, we actually had a class that dedicated a decent amount of time to helping us understand and figure out early on what paths we might want to take. And so my basic conclusion after all of that was I'm pretty certain now that I might not stay in research after grad school, but will likely focus more so on the communication side of science. And because I realized that's something that I'm a little more passionate about, and also my creative outlet, it's more satisfied by following that path. So right now I'm considering most likely going into like grant writing for biotech companies and or just general scientists, or policy making, or like just general community outreach for some kind of organization.
I'm very glad I asked that question because it's definitely I think it's a common theme among undergraduates. They feel a certain pressure to have it figured out. What is it I'm going to be? And to hear all of you, even a few years removed from undergrad, still working on it. It's still an evolving sort of process for each of you. And you've been exposed to new aspects of what you do, and you're trying to figure out really where you want to spend your time and make your impact. So I'm very glad you all shared that, because I think that's illuminating for students. Speaking of students, we're going to open it up to questions. And before we do that, we'll just run through a few quick hits so we get to know you a little bit better. Mostly some light stuff, just to kind of get a feel for who you are. So maybe, I don't know if you all want to unmute right now so we can go through those. But first up, a very important question. Natalie, what's your favorite movie?
Can it be favorite show? It's hard to pick. I really like This Is Us.
Excellent. Very good. Yes, favorite show is fine. Thank you. Layla.
Mine is Raising Arizona, the Coen Brothers movie.
Crystal.
Mine is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World with Michael Cera.
And mine is Perks of Being a Wallflower.
And how about favorite cuisine?
Anything vegan for me. I'm going on 6 years now as a vegan, so yeah, anything vegan is great.
Sushi. I love sushi.
I love curry. Any type of curry, especially Indian curry.
Yeah, Japanese and sushi for me as well.
Awesome. And how about your favorite trip you've taken?
I guess my favorite trip would be the one I took to Vancouver and all of British Columbia. It was really pretty and beautiful, like to see the mountains.
My favorite trip I took during childhood, so a really long time ago, but me and my family visited Syria, which is where part of my family's from. It was a really life-changing experience.
I think my favorite trip so far was last summer. I got to go out to Big Sur, which was so beautiful. There's so many beautiful places in California, but it was just like amazing seeing like the mountains poking through the clouds.
Yeah, and I think my favorite trip is I did classic like backpacking across Europe after my freshman year of undergrad.
Great. Just a couple more. We'll get a little more serious this time. Natalie, what are you most proud of?
I guess for me, a highlight of my graduate career was getting the NSF fellowship. I did not think I was going to get it. I submitted the application like 5 minutes before it was due. But yeah, it felt like a miracle.
I'm most proud of my family and how far we've all come and just how we've been able to grow.
Say right now, I'm most proud of my mentee who is just going to grad school soon, and she got into like all the schools she wanted to, and I've known her since she was a freshman, and just like seeing her like go through the process that I did has just been amazing.
I guess for me, it's being able to get funding for both undergrad and graduate, and not having to worry about student debts or anything like that.
Is there anything that you would do differently if you had the chance?
I think I probably would have just maybe enjoyed like the whole learning process more in undergrad. I think I really took it for granted that your only responsibility is to learn. And I felt like I was maybe too concerned about grades. So I think I just probably would have enjoyed it more.
Mine is pretty similar. That I really wish that I had spent a little more time doing things I was really interested in and just spending time with my friends. Because graduate school, PhD program, you're going to have a ton of time to focus on research, which I also ended up doing in undergrad.
I guess the main thing that I would do differently is something that when I first got here, I guess I compared myself to a lot of other people a lot. And something that I realized over being here is that everybody's PhD is an individual experience. Not everyone's using the PhD to get to the same place. So just like focusing on kind of like what you guys said, like what you're passionate about and going deep into that and like making your experience is the most important thing. And I'm much happier now that I focus on that.
For me, I think biggest regret is not diversifying the classes I was taking more during undergrad, because I was, as a foot fellow, decided to fill my like cognates with another major for most of undergrad. It wasn't until my last semester that I took like a dance class and an animation course, and I'm a very creative person. So I wish I would have done a little more of that back in undergrad.
Really good insights. Thank you all so much for sharing with me. And now I'm going to bring in Shayla, who will open it up for questions from our students. Hey, Shayla.
Everyone. So our first question is coming from Destiny. Destiny, when you come in, go ahead and unmute yourself. Please turn on your camera, introduce yourself, and then ask your question.
Hi, everyone. I'm Destiny. I'm a junior. I'm from Maryland. I'm majoring in microbiology and immunology, and I'm double minoring in health management and policy and chemistry. So one of the questions I asked you guys already touched on, which was how did you narrow down your search? And you guys all kind of gave a similar answer, which was you identified some faculty that you were really interested in joining the research or a mentor that you thought was pretty cool. So I guess my question is, how did you find these labs? How did you find these PIs that were doing this research? Like, does it just boil down to going on the school's website?
Yeah, so one way to start is going on the school's website. The other could be by word of mouth too. Like if you're doing research now, like, or even some of the professors that you have at UM, you can talk to them and ask them, do you know of anybody doing this research? And they could probably lead you to some other contacts or maybe even introduce you. So that's sort of another way. Yeah.
echo that, definitely. And then a lot of, particularly in the biosciences, a lot of programs have like rotations. So you spend, like James had mentioned, you spend the first year trying out different labs and seeing which one is the right fit. So I think trying to find, I honestly, and a lot of it really does involve Google, just trying to see if there are professors, especially if there are 3 to 5 professors all doing things that you're really interested in at a certain school, then I think that would make the school a really good option. But a lot of that is like Googling these departments, trying to like scroll through their faculty pages, and it can take a lot of time, but it is worth it to try and figure out if the school that you're interested in, because of its location and other factors, also has research going on that you're really interested in.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And I think something that I also did that was pretty useful when we went to admit weekends, talking to the graduate students in the lab, because although you have like an advisor that you work with, you also work a lot with the other grad students, and kind of talking to them can give you a better idea of what like the lab dynamics are, because that can change from lab to lab, because there's a lot of factors that kind of go into like the best lab fit. Research is one of those, but I think another important one is the lab dynamic, the people who you'll be working with. So even if you can't reach out to the professors themselves by emailing, because a lot of them are kind of really swamped down with emails sometimes, reaching out to the grad students in their labs, which you can tell by the website, is useful, because I think a lot of the websites I know in my department, they're not really updated. So if you want to know what they're working on right now, like today, asking the grad students is probably the best way.
And I'd say the biggest advice is to like get organized before applying. So I like came up with a spreadsheet for each university I was considering, and then went through literally like just through their faculty. It's very time consuming. Went through the faculty there and looked at their research and found a couple. And if a university didn't have 3 or more faculty that I was interested in, I took it off of my list. Because like Crystal was saying, there's a bunch of factors, because it could be that the PI themselves aren't like a decent person to work with, or they don't have the funding, or they aren't considering taking students the year that you join. So having at least 3 is like a good general rule to start with. But yeah, essentially it is just pretty time consuming. Like you do just have to spend time on the faculty or department pages and seeing what all research is being done.
So James, you mentioned that you made a spreadsheet before applying and before deciding which ones. So do any of you have anything like that one thing that you think made a really big impact or like really benefited you in terms of the application process and just your success in general during the transition from an undergrad to a grad student?
I can start. I had one thing that really benefited me was that almost every school, most likely that you're applying to, will have an application fee, but almost certainly you'll be able to get that fee waived if you email the right people. For me, I ended up getting every single one of my graduate school application fees waived, which made a huge difference. I know a lot of us are on scholarship. I mean, really all of us are on some major scholarships. So yeah, that not having to spend hundreds of dollars paying for applications, because each fee is like between like $50 and $100. A lot of them at least are. So that was huge for me. Yeah, and I think like cultivating good relationships with your professors and making sure you have strong letters, I think that's huge.
I would definitely agree, like on the note of like doing admission application, like getting the fee waivers, kind of doing that a little bit sooner, because I didn't realize that because I was submitting everything like right before it was due, obviously. So I didn't realize that for some of them you have to submit, like ask for the fee waiver like a month before the application. So unfortunately, I only got some fee application like waivers, but for 2 of the schools that I actually did end up getting in, I had to pay like $100 for the fee. But if I would have just like had the foresight to like apply for that earlier. So yeah, kind of trying to figure out those schools like a little bit before is definitely a good idea because you could definitely get all of them waived. That's definitely possible.
Just echoing Layla and Crystal, I got a couple of fee waivers too from a conference. SACNIS, they often have like booths for the different schools, and if you just ask them for a fee waiver, they give you like a little code that you can put in. So that's another way to go about it too.
For me, the biggest thing applying to grad school was being organized. I had a spreadsheet that had a couple things that for me were really major. So of course, faculty of interest with links to their websites and stuff. I also had the amount that each school paid, second, or in a separate box that considered how much like expected rent and fees and everything else of that area were for different cities as well. Also for fee waivers, I made sure I had that months in advance because for pretty much every school, you can dig around and find them. So I had fee waivers for all of them. Some of them I did have to contact financial aid, and there are some additional steps, but I had all of that lined out ahead of time, like well in advance, because I didn't want that to be like something I have to stress about last minute. But yeah, just making something that organizes the things that you consider most important about grad school can be super helpful in the end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Destiny. Our next question is from a student that's anonymous. So if anyone wants to answer this one, how did you make your application stand out from others? Is there anyone that intentionally had anything?
I could go because I have the thing that I always go, which is that like I'm an engineer and I like art. So that's always my thing. But I think genuinely that is something that does set me apart. Like, I feel like a lot of times people even now ask me like, oh, how did you make that figure? Because a lot of science is kind of disseminating information in a way that people can clearly understand. And I think that having some type of eye for design really like helps that. Like having something that kind of like, I mean, it sounds cliche, but something that's like non-typical, something that sets you apart, something that like you're super interested in that not everybody is, because everybody has that one thing, and just finding how to connect it to what you're also like applying for. I feel like, yeah. And like talking about those types of passions in my admissions application, I'm pretty sure is part of what got me in, because even in my interviews, they were asking me questions about stuff like that and a lot of the research that I had done before, because even though it wasn't directly connected to, I feel like tangentially, it was still kind of like influencing the way that I did things.
I think too, maybe just telling your story. I feel like a lot of us are like first generation, like first to go to college in our families, and that's really big, you know. And I think just telling your story and how you got to that point and like what your goals are, and can really set you apart.
I think this question can be a little bit difficult for some like molecular biology programs, I guess specifically, but I think it also is true for a lot of STEM PhD programs, because mostly what you want to do is just seem like you have an idea, or that you've thought about the career path, and that you've thought about your research, and that you're excited about it, and you're excited about research in the future. But I do really definitely want to echo Crystal and Natalie's suggestions. I think another idea too is just showing that you've thought about maybe you've thought about different ideas to go with the PhD. For me, I had some outreach work. So I had worked with teaching science in the community, and worked with helping other people to get research positions. And I think if you show that you want to pursue research yourself, but also want to give back in a related way, that could be really huge.
For me, I think something that helped out a lot is I do have like a decent background in creative writing specifically. And so I feel like something that really helps with these and just grants in general, or anytime you're trying to get something and persuade someone, is the art of storytelling. Like even in the nonprofit world, they literally will train people on how to use storytelling as opposed to statistics to get funding or get more people to care or get involved. And the same applies to your own personal story. So anything that makes you stand out, any adversity that you face, anything unique about your circumstances, being first gen, all that stuff, it's not about just incorporating them, but also showing that you have persevered, and it has caused active growth in your life that has led you towards where you are now in your pursuit for graduate school. And that's something that they do look for as well, because grad school can be very stressful, things fail, things go wrong. And for some people, they really aren't used to things not going their way, and it can just cause a lot of complications. So knowing that you are a person who can overcome challenging situations in general can really help with those applications.
Thank you so much. We have 2 questions left before we wrap up. Our next question is from Kayla. Kayla, please go ahead and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi guys, I'm a Jenkins Scholar. My name's Kayla. I am a senior and I'm going to UNC Chapel Hill in the fall for the PhD program there. They don't split us into like things yet. I'll probably be in cell biology and physiology though too. So I just have a few questions about, I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous just thinking about like the experience that I've gotten at It's been kind of rocky, just especially with COVID interrupting everything. And I'm kind of nervous like going into the rotation process of like how much I've learned in my experience at like how am I going to be trained? I just wanted to hear from you guys how like your rotations went, if your schools had them. And I know it's mentor to mentor based as well, but just like a general overview, because like I'm still struggling doing some science stuff. Like I know how to do most of what I'm supposed to do, but a lot of times, like you're saying, things fail, don't work out, and I'm just nervous that like they're gonna be like, what's wrong with you? Like, why don't you know how to do this? So if you guys have any insight into that, that'd be great.
So I think one thing that I wish I did was interviewed more PIs when I was like thinking about prospective rotations, because in my program, we only had to do 3, and I kind of like decided on my 3, like, well, these are the people I want to work with based on the techniques that they were doing and the problems that they were doing. But you can interview a lot of different PIs, and just because you meet with them and like talk to them about their research doesn't mean you have to commit to a rotation. And I think that's something that I did not understand. And I thought, okay, if I'm meeting with them, I have to, I have to rotate in this lab. But I think some things to consider is, you know, like maybe getting a feel for that person's mentoring style, because some labs are more like throw you on the deep end and you work completely independently. And that works for some people, but for others, you know, you might want more like one-on-one training. If it's a younger PI, you might get to work side by side with that PI. So one of my rotations was actually like that. He had just got hired by Hopkins. So I got to work a lot one-on-one with him, which was nice. But, you know, it depends on, you know, if you like that. And I would say like explore, yeah, like different mentoring styles, younger PI versus someone more established. And then also maybe like take the time to see like what techniques you like, you know, in neuroscience, there's like, you know, different things that you can do. You can be more on the molecular biology side. You can be a physiologist, you know, you can do circuits and systems. So yeah, getting a feel for like what sub area and like just, and I think like going in, I felt a lot of pressure as well. Like, oh, I have to know like how to do all these things, but they really don't expect you to know, you know, to really know like anything at that level. So don't be nervous. I was definitely nervous and felt a lot of imposter syndrome. And it really depends on who you work with too. I mean, I had one guy saying, "You've never poured a gel." Like when I first joined the lab, was super embarrassed. But yeah, they really don't expect you to be like out on your own usually.
Yeah, I want to echo everything Natalie said, but also that the sentiment you shared, Kayla, is so relatable. That is exactly how I felt going into grad school. I was having, I really can't describe like how nervous I was during my first year and through the rotation process. And looking back, like it makes me really sad because you really don't need to be. Like they would be so lucky to have you in their lab. And also, I mean, the lab, I thought that I needed to come in with all of these skills, and you shared a similar sentiment. I ended up joining a lab where I didn't know anything about that topic. And if you have the right lab and the right PI, they will not be asking you things like, why haven't you poured a gel before? They'll be so excited to teach you. In fact, my PI, even though he's like not really a young or new PI, or not that young or not that new, he was so excited that I joined the lab that he wanted to like personally teach me things just because he was like so happy. And like, I shared earlier that being like kind and reliable and thoughtful, but like really being confident like takes you so far. I think that's a huge thing that I wish that I had done, is just go in with confidence. And it's okay not to know. Like the whole point of the PhD is like learning how to ask questions. And I think Crystal also shared that there can be somewhat of a competitiveness and like a feeling like maybe you're not, like you're comparing yourself to other people in the program. At least that was true in my program. And I think just trying to like block out that as much as possible and just focus on what you like and what you want to do, and just meeting people and like staying around people and like making friends who are supportive and not like trying to compare like what grade did you get on that, like like that kind of stuff. Like just avoid that as much as possible. I think that's probably the best advice I could give. Oh, and email me please if you have any questions about cell biology, physiology, or anything else, because I am in that field.
I would definitely like 100% agree with all that, because I feel like I kind of had the same experience. Like I thought I was like, I do not know anything, and I went into a lab that was very different than all the research I'd done before, and everyone kind of did it, kind of a little bit familiar with it. And so for a lot of it, I felt like, wow, I don't know how I got in here. It must have been a scam. They have no idea that I have no idea what I'm doing. But the truth and the reality is that they read your application, they saw everything they have, they know it, they kind of have an idea of what you know, and they still admitted you. So they want you there. They want to help you to get to the point they would. If they didn't want you there, they probably wouldn't admit you, and they would have been their loss, honestly. But the fact that they admitted you means that you belong there, and you shouldn't let like anybody else make you feel like, oh, maybe like I'm not supposed to be here, like the imposter syndrome that Layla was talking about. And sometimes people will kind of be like that. I mean, I feel like that's in any situation. You'll always have people who are not exactly super supportive and kind of not taking that to heart, and finding the people who are actually going to be there for you, because they do exist. And kind of just focusing on getting what you need done and not comparing yourself to other people who are on a different path, really, because yeah, just like focusing on what you can do and getting yourself to the point where you feel good about what you've done. And that's it. So yeah, you're going to do great, I'm pretty sure, since you already got in. Congrats.
Yeah, and I feel like especially reminding yourself constantly, like they accepted you. Like you were literally probably one of hundreds of applicants. They admitted you, they wanted you here. And so I like, because of that, even though I'm in a department, my background is marine biology. And so I'm a lot of what I'm doing now is learning new stuff and new techniques constantly, but I don't ever treat myself like, oh, like, why don't I know these things? Like, I'm not ready. Because mostly you are here because they know that you know how to learn. And like rotations are more so they're not testing you to be like, oh, you don't know how to do this already. Oh, I needed someone who already knew how to, like, they really just want someone who is dedicated and willing and intelligent enough to learn the new things that they need to make a task and how like accomplish a task or pursue a project. And like, that's the biggest thing to keep in mind. And especially when it comes to rotations, like there are some professors who do treat it like a test, who will judge you if you don't know how to do something, or they expect you to be more independent and aren't listening to the fact that you aren't as like well-versed in whatever techniques they're using. So it's really important, especially with rotations, to kind of suss out professors beforehand. Best ways are to, one, talk to older students in the department. That is like #1 thing to do. They will gossip nonstop. As soon as you tell them about a lab you're trying to rotate in, they'll be like, oh, no, you don't want to be there. Like they'll give you advice right away. And then also contacting not only the PI, but people in the lab and people who have left the lab as well. So undergrads who were there for a year, or like postdocs, or someone who has left who has less to lose by being honest. But yeah, mostly with rotations, keeping in mind, like it is a learning experience. Like I'm treating mine as a learning experience. I already kind of know which lab I'm going to join, but I still have one rotation left that I'm starting this week actually. And I'm really like, it is a lab that I'm interested in, but mostly I want to use it as an opportunity to learn some skills that I know I'm lacking because of my previous research experience.
Thank you guys. That was very helpful.
Laomi, if you could go ahead and ask your question, make sure you introduce yourself. And everybody doesn't have to answer the question. So if you guys have something really strong you want to say, please do so. But Laomi, go ahead.
Thank you all for being here and for answering all the questions. So I'm Laomi. I'm a first-year student majoring in psychology and English with a minor in human and social development. And my question was what the kind of like environment is in your PhD program. I've heard some kinds are, more competitive, some are more like collaborative. And so I just am curious to hear like what your experience is.
Like one of the things that stood out about Hopkins was just how collegial the environment was. So everybody is really willing to talk to you about like your research or share reagents. So it actually is a really good environment at Hopkins, but I will say that it does vary from lab to lab at times. So when you do go to graduate school, it's really important to just get a feel for the lab culture and see if it's a fit.
So this ended up being really what made my decision on what graduate school I was going to go to. I interviewed for 3 different graduate programs, and I thought that Yale would be like the worst, that everyone would be so rude and so like snooty. I don't know why I had that. I guess like Ivy League, whatever, because the other 2, well, anyway, I ended up like my expectations were totally opposite. Like what I expected was totally opposite from the reality. The reality was that the schools I thought would be like, I interviewed for one school in California, and I thought it was going to be like so chill and relaxed because it's like a beach town, and everyone was like so hyper competitive and like type A, and just like it wasn't what I wanted. But then like when I visited Yale and talked to the students, like and talk to the faculty, everyone was so chill and so nice and just like really collaborative. And there was a lot of support for students and freedom to pursue what we're interested in. So that made a huge decision and for me, and I think that's true in a lot of different fields. So at Yale, so I was really pleasantly surprised how true that is, how non-competitive and how not ultra competitive it is in my program.
I would definitely say, although you might have a list of schools that you're interested in when you're applying, like after you get in and you kind of get a feel for what they're like after kind of like talking to people there, you might kind of change how you feel. Because I know when I first started, I was thinking that I was going to one school. I don't even think I was even considering going to Stanford seriously until admit weekend when I like met some of the people here. And I kind of realized that this is kind of more of the environment that is like a lot more open. You can kind of choose your own path. A lot of the other programs, you like start in one department and you have like with one advisor and you have to stay with them the whole time. And I kind of wanted more flexibility to kind of like figure out what I wanted to and kind of move at any time. Like people like move labs like in their 3rd year here and can still graduate because you just have like a lot of flexibility to figure out if you don't like something, you can switch and still like be on track, like get like schools that have that flexibility. And that's kind of something that I wanted and went with my personality a lot better than some of the other options. So yeah, just kind of being open to changing your mind later and kind of, yeah, talking to people to make sure it's the right fit.
I'll just quickly say, yeah, a good way to find out whether or not like a school's, specifically like a department, is known to be like pretty competitive. One, networking in general. I found out a lot of that information just from going to conferences and talking to grad students primarily, who are a lot more honest about what the environment's like at a given university. Also just professors in general, they'll talk, and then also asking someone in the department just simple questions specific for that department about, one, how likely is it that professors will actually get tenure, is something that can give you an idea of how like competitive the university is. And then 2, in terms of grad students, like how often does someone like get kicked out of the program for like not meeting the academic standards or like passing the quals. Like that's a big factor if that is something that you're worried about. Because some schools, especially, I've learned that if the department itself doesn't have a ton of funding, they will actively use like qualification exams and stuff like that as a means to shorten the number of people they have to pay for. But like getting those answers up front by asking those questions can really help.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all. This was a great Q&A session. I think you guys gave a lot of good gems in there, so we appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Shayla. Shayla, thank you for your help. And Jeanette, thanks for your help today. To the attendees, thanks for asking great questions. We appreciate you coming. And to the panelists, you guys were wonderful. I feel compelled to make this maybe a semesterly series or an annual series, something like that. A lot of good insights shared, a lot of real honest feedback, a little bit of vulnerability. All that's really helpful, I think, to share with students. So we thank you so much. And I know some of us here are wearing gear from our current institutions, but I'm sure you're all pretty excited to still throw up the U one last time. So let's throw it up for old time's sake. Great, thank you guys. You guys take care.